So Valentine's Day is coming up, right? And one of the greatest ways that we show that we're making the shift from me to we is by the love that we display toward each other, right? So I thought we'd have a little fun as we get started this morning. And there's some images on the screen, as you'll see. And I'm also doing this from us, maybe there's one or two of us in here that are slacking a little bit, don't know what we're going to do for Valentine's Day. So I'm about to help you out, men, and make it maybe a little easier for you to figure out what you need to do for somebody. Because we all have people in our life, whether it's a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or maybe it's a son or a daughter or whoever. You've got a mom or a dad. You got people in your life that you want to show your love to. So you see images on the screen. I want you to think about, if I could pick one of these as my gift, which one would I pick? So you got the top part is like, take me to a movie theater, let's watch a movie. You've got concert tickets or sporting tickets. You got, let's go out and eat at a restaurant. You've got, just give me some flowers, that would be nice. How about no kids? Like, that would be great. We're trying to help you with that one, guys and ladies. So all you gotta do is bring your kids here Wednesday, sign them up first, and then drop them off. You can have no kids for 3 hours. Maybe you just want a home-cooked meal. Let's just sit down together, have a meal in the house. Give me some chocolate, and I'll be good. Maybe that's you. Maybe, like, give me some jewelry, some gifts. So, guys don't like be intentionally looking to see what your spouse's hand goes up, but I'm trying to help you out here. So, all right. So if you can only pick one, so which one are you going to pick? All right, we're just going to go through these. Don't vote twice. You only get to vote once. Here we go. All right, movie tickets. Take me to the movies. Any movie people in here? One, two, a few. Okay, all right. So see, there you go. You know what to do now. All right, take me to a sporting event. Take me to a concert. Buy me some tickets. Let's go somewhere. Who's that? All right. A few of you. We've not hit the sweet spot yet. What about let's go out to eat? Nice meal. Take me out to eat somewhere. Okay, there's two for that one. Okay, flowers. Give me some flowers. Send them, like, give me some, no, not really any flower people in here, okay? Don't buy flowers. What about jewelry? Give me some gifts. Buy me stuff. Show me how much you love me by what you buy me. There we go. All right, chocolate. Where's the chocolate people in the room? Come on. Dessert people? I know there's one sitting right here. My job's easy. Just buy chocolate. What about a home-cooked meal? Just give me a meal, like a night to slow down and just be there together. That would be awesome. And how about just get rid of the kids? Like, just get rid of the kids. I'm there with you all. Like, I love mine, but like, yeah, I'm looking forward to 3 hours with no kid. We're taking advantage of that, so looking forward to that. But anyway, all that to say, there are ways that we show love, right? And we know when we start talking about love that love goes so much, it's more than words, and we know that, but we use words to verbalize our love sometimes. So there's nothing wrong with words, but we know that it's more than words. We know that also love can be an emotional thing. And if you truly do love someone, there is emotion that's attached to that. But we know that love has to be more than just emotion, right? It can't just be the emotion. It can't just be the words. So we know that ultimately love is displayed through action, through intentional efforts that come from a commitment to care for someone, to be present in someone's life. And that's a commitment that comes from the core of who we are and how we truly feel about someone. And so love gets displayed in actions. And I think it's really important as you think about the way that you demonstrate your love, to be sensitive to how you are inclined to love other people and how the people in your life are inclined to love, to receive your love, because we're all wired a little differently. Thank goodness, right? None of us are all the same. It would maybe be easier to figure out how to love one another if we were all the same, but we're all wired differently, and we actually have these things called love languages. Are you all familiar with that a little bit? I'm not going to talk about love languages all morning this morning, but it is important for you to know your love language and the people that you're trying to love, their love language. And so I actually want to encourage you this week. This may even help you with like getting ready for Valentine's Day, but we know love goes way much farther than just one day. To go to the number 5, lovelanguages.com, and you can actually take a free love language test. I'd encourage you to do this with your spouse or maybe even with your kids. It's really important to do, because here's what happens a lot of times when we start talking about loving one another, because we know it's something Jesus has told us to do, and that's what we're going to look at in just a minute, is that as I said, you're inclined to love people a certain way, and other people are inclined to receive love a certain way. Here's what happens a lot of times in relationships. I work through this with couples, especially couples getting ready to get married. I take them through this process. It's really important because here's what undoubtedly happens, right? Like the guy is like, I'm just going to buy her a lot of gifts, and so he starts buying jewelry and all these necklaces and just buying her stuff, and he gives her these gifts, and he's like, this is going to knock it out of the park. She's going to be so excited, and he gives her the gift, and she's grateful, and she's appreciative, but it's not the response he was looking for. And he's like, well, maybe I didn't spend enough. So then he goes back, he's like, I'm going to spend more, and then I get to sit down, like, and then this just kind of festers, and I don't really get to what's going on, and so I get in, like, a counseling session with him, and he's like, she's just ungrateful. Like, I buy her gifts, and she doesn't even get excited. She says thanks, but it's like, and then I try to buy more gifts, and it's like, so I just ask, I'm like, do you know what her love language is? Well, all women like gifts, right? I mean, that's usually what I get. And I'm like, now you got to explore that and figure that out. And so what happens is maybe what your other person you're trying to love, maybe what they value is quality time. Maybe, honestly, they could care less about the gifts that you give them, and they'd rather just have an hour of conversation with you. Those are important things to know in a relationship because God has called us to love each other, and what happens is love can be done when things are going smooth, right? But the real test of our love is when life gets difficult, when life gets messy, when life gets hard. And so we look at a verse like Romans 5:8. This is where we begin to take the focus off of how we love to. Let's look at how Jesus has loved us. I mean, Romans 5:8 says that God demonstrated his love toward us, and that while we were what? Say it. Sinners, Christ died for us. Not when we had it all together, not when things were great and easy and it was convenient for God to love us, but when we were at our worst, when we were messed up, when we needed him the most, Jesus said, I will die for you. I will go to the cross for you. Jesus has taught us that love, the greatest act of love, is laying down our life for our friends. It's John 15:13. And he says, you show that love for other people, not when it's convenient, but your real love is expressed and revealed when it's difficult, when it's messy, when it's hard. And there's a good chance that some of us in here maybe at some point in your life, you've tried to love in a difficult situation, and it didn't work out the way that you thought that you would, so you're hesitant. And even as we start talking about taking these next steps as a church and challenge you to shift from me to we, and thinking about being a part of a missional community as they form, there's some hesitation there. There's the thought to say, it's easier for me to just sit back and play it safe, not take the risk of stepping into a relationship with someone because I might get hurt. I might try to love them and they may not receive it, or it may not work out the way that I thought that it would. And so we have this tendency to just stay back and play it safe. And I think when we stand back and play it safe, we're always going to miss out on what we could experience when we love beyond ourselves, when we put ourselves out there and we step into those relationships, because ultimately that is what Jesus has done for us. He didn't just play it safe and sit on his throne up in heaven and say, look, I love you, I love you, I love you, figure it out. He said, no, I'm going to come take on flesh, and I'm going to live, and I'm going to show you what love looks like. And in the process, I'm going to love you like nobody else ever can. That's the good news of the gospel. That's what Jesus has revealed to us. And so for us this morning to begin to think about as we make this shift from me to we, what does it look like for us to love? And love is, as we talk about forming missional communities, but even just individually, what does that look like for me to love others and make this shift from me to we? So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to focus in on a conversation that Jesus had with his missional community. Him and his 12 disciples, Jesus built this community of people that he was close to, that he was doing life with, but they had a mission. And we see that their mission led them to grow their community, and they reached more people. And so we're wanting to take this model of Jesus and form missional communities and be on mission together. And Jesus has this conversation with his missional community about some things that are about to happen, some change that's about to happen, but he gives them a command, and he says, I want you to pay attention to this command, but I want you to also watch in the middle of this how Jesus gives this command rooted in love, and then they just get distracted by everything else that's about to change. And I wonder if they really got in the moment Jesus' command that he gave them. And I want us today to focus in on that command, but to also to learn from how the disciples responded to that command and how they stayed kind of me-focused in this moment rather than embracing Jesus' command. I think later on they eventually, they get it, they embrace the command. And so maybe we can identify with where they're at this morning. So if you would, look with me in John chapter 13. And I'm going to read a chunk of scripture that runs over into chapter 14 because I want us to get the full context of what's happening here. So let's take a look at this. It says, when he was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in him. Verse 32, if God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I'm going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Moving into chapter 14, Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't even know where you're going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. And Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I've been with you for such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. Verse 12, very truly I tell you, Jesus says, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing. And they will do even greater things than these. Because I am going to the Father, and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. As we look at this in the midst of Jesus wanting to prepare his disciples to look ahead and to be ready for what's to come ahead and the changes that's going to be happening with him, he gives them this command that's rooted in something that they knew. They knew they were supposed to love one another. That part of it wasn't a new command. The new command in that was how they were supposed to love one another. That's the game changer in this conversation. But if we're not careful like the disciples, we'll kind of tune that out. I don't know about you, I just kind of got the vibe like the disciples tuned out that whole command. Like Jesus drops this big command. He's like, look, I know you know, love one another, but I want you to love one another like I have loved you. And then they just kind of go into panic mode. And they start asking all these questions. It's like freak out mode. And I just look at this text and I'm like, did they even get what Jesus said? Like, did they even see the command that he gave them? Or are they just like us and they get all confused about maybe the change that's happening and the moving pieces and like what's going on? And they miss the simple command that Jesus had been living with them and teaching them. And so for us today, as we start thinking about making the shift from me to we, at the core of us, we've got to do just like the disciples had the opportunity to do. We've got to stop, hit pause on life for a moment, and ask God to teach us how we love one another. What does it look like for us to love one another as Jesus loved us? Because that's the big idea. And so what Jesus is trying to get them to see here is that when you will love people the way that I have loved you, people will see me. And that's pretty powerful. That loving like Jesus will actually lead people to Jesus. And every time I've read verses 34 and 35, I've looked at that and I've been like, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around and think about how do we actually do that. Because Jesus says that I want you to love one another just as I have loved you. And as you do that, then people will know that you are my disciples. In other words, Jesus is saying the way that you love one another will tell whoever they is those people that's not in this conversation. It's those people who maybe don't yet know him. The way that you love one another will tell other people that you know me, that you are my disciples. And I read that and I think, how do we do that as a church? How do we love one another in such a way that the people who aren't a part of the church, the they, that Jesus is maybe talking about right there, that they are able to then know that there's a love from heaven that has invaded our hearts? How do we do that? How do we go about that? He's called us to love, and I think sometimes we struggle to love one another if we're honest. We struggle to love one another in this way, and I think maybe perhaps it's because we haven't yet really started to grasp just how much it is that God already loves us. And I think until he begins to reveal more of what that love looks like to us, we may struggle to love one another, but I think he wants us to wrestle with this tension. I think he wants us to grow in this. But this is our big thought for the day, is that loving like Jesus will lead people to Jesus. So what does this look like? How do we do this? What do we learn here from the disciples? Here's the first thought underneath that this morning is that Jesus is, we're gonna look at three different ways that we think through how to love like Jesus. And how do we start to experience this together and move from just me to we? And here's number one. It's got to do with stories. It's stories. Jesus' love leaves people in awe. There is nothing more powerful than a story that just tells about Jesus' love and what he's done in our lives. And it leaves people in awe they can't explain. I want to show you a quick video. It's actually about 2.5 minutes of a conversation of a woman whose husband was killed overseas. And she is being interviewed by Anderson Cooper. And just kind of watch. He is just dumbfounded by the way this woman has chosen to love like Jesus in the middle of this horrible situation. Go ahead and play that video.
What I want people to know about him, what he wants to know about him is really, it's not about what Ronnie did. It's what Ronnie wanted to show to the Libyan people, and that's, he wanted to shine the light and the love of Jesus to the Libyan people that he knew. He really did. He didn't want any attention onto himself about being a good guy or a good teacher or the fun teacher. It was just about the love and the forgiveness that we know from God.
And I've heard
that's what he wants to leave behind.
And I've heard you say that, I mean, you wrote a letter in part to the people who killed him, saying that you love them and that you forgive them. That's an extraordinary thing.
I do. I honestly do not have any anger towards them, and I want them to know this. I don't want any revenge. I just really want them to know that I do love them and I forgive them. And Ronnie would want this. I pray and hope that our son Hosea will believe this. And I pray with all my heart that the attackers, that maybe this incident will call them to know the love and the forgiveness that's found in Jesus. I really do.
Is that something you were able to feel right away? I mean, it's only been a few weeks. Sometimes, you know, people may get to that stage months or years later, but to feel that so soon, I think is going to surprise a lot of people.
The first day of the incident, I wasn't even thinking in regards, any emotions in regards to the attackers, but it came really soon. It came within that evening or the second day. It's got to be God's Spirit pouring into me, replacing that anger with his love. Yeah, they took away my husband, and I love my husband, but it's got to be God's Spirit that's pushing me to show them that this is what God wants them to see. He wants them to see that love and forgiveness is real, even if they've done this to my husband, and I want them to see this and to know this.
And you really feel that in your heart. You don't feel anger. You don't feel hatred toward them. I mean, I'm sorry I keep bringing this up, but I think just it's an extraordinary thing to be able to feel that.
I just envision the black Jeep driving up to him, and I don't know their faces. I just want them to know that God loves them and can forgive them for this. And I don't know them, but that's how I honestly feel. It may sound crazy, but it's God's Spirit that's putting this inside of me.
I watched that video and I think about when Jesus says to love one another as I have loved you, and she's talking about it in the context of enemies, but what she's sharing from is a very real place of hurt and pain. And I think for us, when Jesus says love one another, I mean, he loved us when he was in a place of hurt and pain. And it was our sin, it was our mistakes, it was our rebellion against him. And Jesus shows up and he loves people, he serves people, he goes to the cross and dies for people that didn't deserve his love. You and I didn't deserve his love, but he goes to the cross and he dies and he defeats death and he resurrects, and all this hasn't yet taken place yet, but as he's talking to the disciples, they've watched Jesus love and serve and empower and minister to people that the culture said didn't deserve it. Jesus, knowing from a place of betrayal that was coming, he chooses to love. So for us as a church, as a people, what's it look like for us to know that Jesus loves us in such a way that people are just left in awe? And I think it begins with understanding our stories, understanding how God has moved and worked in our own life. It's so important for us to be dialed into that. I mean, in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 through 21, Paul says, I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being. Is almost exactly what she was saying in that video. So that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, look at what Paul says, being rooted and established in what? Love. May have power together, we're better together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. If as a body of people, if we aren't coming into a greater understanding of the love that Jesus has for us, then the world outside will not ever see and experience that love. And that's what Jesus is trying to get the disciples to understand here, is that I have loved you in a way that is beyond human strength. And the way that I have loved you is the way that I want you to love each other. And when you can love each other with that way, from a place of just putting yourself aside and investing yourself into someone else, when you can do that, other people are going to know that something's happening. There's something different about the way that this group of people loves one another and loves the people around them, and people are going to take notice of that. So I ask you the question this morning, are you, first of all, in awe of God's love for you? Does it stir you up in the morning to know that even though you flopped and you failed yesterday, that his mercies are new in the morning and he will meet you right there in that place if you'll just come to him and grab that love and that forgiveness and whatever it is that you need for that day, he makes that available to us. Do we know that that is there for us? Are we in awe of that? Are we coming into a greater understanding, as Paul says, of the width and the depth of God's love? Are we being moved and shaken by God's love? I can tell you that I know for me and for all of us, if we aren't being stirred up by the love that God has already poured into us and has available to us, then we will not love each other as God has called us to love. So it's our own stories that must stir us up from within about how God has loved us, but then there's the beauty of getting to know other people's stories. It's one of the coolest things that I loved as starting here with the church in May and just taking the last month to get to know some of your stories, but also creating opportunities where some of you get to know each other's stories. We had some moments over the summer and the fall as I was preparing, starting to train some people in disciple making and getting ready to launch our missional communities and laying some of the groundwork for that, pulling people together and just having them share their stories. And just hearing people in this room share with other people in this room from a real place of how they've experienced God's love and transformation in their life is a powerful thing. how well do we even know each other's own stories? Because here's what happens. The beauty is we begin to see how much God has loved us. And then we get to hear about how other people have experienced God's love. You know what? That compels us to live with a much softer, more sensitive approach to the people around us who have yet to experience God's love. And that's why we are calling these missional communities, because we want to be a community of people that are being transformed by the love of Jesus. But at the same time, we understand that it doesn't just stop with us. There is a mission. There's a purpose for us to love the people around us. But just on an individual level, for a moment, are you in awe of Jesus' love? Is he shifting you from me to we this morning, just in the way that he stirs and moves in your heart? So that's the first thing I think he wanted, and maybe the most important thing here that he wanted the disciples to see is the power of love and the love of and how he showed up in the middle of their story and loved them, and the same is true for us. But there's a second thing that I think Jesus wants the disciples to consider here in this text, and it's persistence. So when we think about making the shift from me to we and loving as that if we'll love like Jesus, we'll lead people to Jesus. So we think about stories are able to help tell about that love and reveal that love, but we also think about persistence. If you ever tried to start something and then in the middle of it, you kind of realize that you didn't know what you're doing. I don't know if anybody's ever been there before. I've had many of those moments in my life. When Jennifer and I first got married, I decided I was going to bake her a cake. I don't remember if this was for Valentine's Day or what, but I remembered I was going to bake her a cake because I was like, how hard can it be to bake a cake, right? I mean, I had never done it before, but I was like, I'm going to bake a cake. And so I started, I did the whatever it is. I haven't baked one since then, so you can see where this story's going, but I baked the cake part, and it looked okay. It didn't, it rose, I guess it was supposed to. It wasn't flat, and it came out okay, and I stacked the two cakes together, and but what I didn't know, and she was like, do you want me to help you? I was like, I got this. It's a cake. How hard can it be? I've got this. She's like, I can help you. I'm like, I'm doing it for you. I don't need your help. And so I got the cakes. They're there, and they're warm. And what I didn't know is you're supposed to wait to ice the cake till it cools down a little bit. So I just started throwing icing on it. And I was like, here it goes. And then the cake starts tearing up into the icing, and it's it was going to be this nice cake with white icing on it. I think I did a strawberry cake, so it was red with white icing. And then it just started to look like there was sprinkles all in the icing and cake crumbs everywhere. And then I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. I can't fix it. I've ruined the cake now. And then you get to that point, and you're just like, oh, well. So I just kept going, throwing the icing on, and so I just she had this sprinkly pink looking ice. She's like, did you put sprinkles on it? I'm like, no, not sprinkles. I was like, are you supposed to wait until you ice it, until it cools down? She was like, is that cake in the icing? I'm like, yeah, it is. I haven't baked a cake since then, but you reach that point where you're just I just got to keep going, right? I'm this far in it, I got to keep going. And I think with Jesus and the disciples, he's like, look, things are about to change. I'm not going to be, my plan has never been to be here with you all along. And you got to keep going. You got to love one another. Things are about to change. And I just want you to keep doing what I've told you to do and what I've demonstrated to you. I want you to push forward, keep pursuing. And then they go into freak out mode. And they don't even pay attention to the command. And they just start asking all these questions. I think Jesus would say the same thing for us. He would say, look, people, the Grove Church, I want you to love one another. And as you love like I have loved, that's going to lead people to me. And that's end game. That's the win. The win for our lives, the win for missional communities is nothing other than loving like Jesus has loved and leading people to him. That's it. That's the win. But we watch how they respond, and we can learn from them. We can learn some barriers that keep us from persevering and persisting on in the love that Jesus called us to love each other with. And I noticed a few. You could probably see some of these in the text if you look back through it. I mean, we learn from almost all of them. You look at Peter. Peter, maybe we can relate to Peter because when we start thinking about making the shift from me to we can have too much confidence in ourselves. I mean, Peter's kind of overconfident here. And he's like, Jesus, don't talk about that. I'll die for you, Jesus. You don't have to. I've got Peter in this overconfidence that comes out. And Jesus is like, Peter, you don't even know what you're talking about. You're going to deny me before the rooster crows. Just chill. And maybe in some of us, there's this overconfidence that can creep up that we can think, I'm sure I don't need anybody else. I'm actually better by myself. I got this. And Jesus would say, no, we got to love one another. Don't be overconfident. We look at Philip in here, and Philip is, there's kind of this disconnect there with Philip, and Jesus is like, Philip's like, well, how do we know where the Father is and what's going on with the Father? And Jesus is like, well, if you've seen me, like I've been walking with you, Philip. Have you not got this yet? You know, it's like I imagine Jesus, he's probably maybe a little caught off guard because he probably thought his disciples were a little more ready to handle this conversation. And now they're like in freak out mode. And he's like, what do you mean you don't even know the Father? Like, I am the Father's. Have we not talked about this? Like, you know, you have those conversations with your kids. It's like, how many times have I already told you this? I kind of feel like Jesus is having one of these moments here with his disciples. He's like, do you not get this? God, I have been with you. I've shown you these things. You've got this. So maybe it's a lack of confidence. Where Peter was overconfident, maybe Philip had a lack of confidence in what he had seen and what he had experienced. And then we look at Thomas, and Thomas is just like, I need to know more. Like, I need to know more. Give me more. Tell me more. I need to know more facts. Give me more information. For some of us, we think that it's going to be hard for me to love somebody else until I learn more. And I would say the greatest thing you can do is just to be able to take whatever God has already shown you, take that part of your story, and just be willing to share that with other people, to love one another. And there's just this general anxiety, I think, among the disciples. And so for us this morning, when we think about loving one another and then stepping into community and loving one another, to the point that would actually push us out to love other people and lead them to Jesus, that can feel a little intimidating. It can feel a little heavy, and there's going to be barriers that are there, but Jesus would say, look, push on. Love through it. I've created you this way. I've designed you this way. Love through it. And then the third thing that we see, and we'll end with this. So we see that we love one another through our stories. We love one another through persistence, but we love one another through the mission. And the win is bigger than what we think that it is. What comes from a commitment to love one another is way bigger than what we can think. Go back and look at verse 12. If you're following along on the Bible app or in your Bible, look at verse 12. And I'm always like blown away by what Jesus says in verse 12. I don't want us to miss what he says in verse 12 because it's huge. And I don't know that I even fully understand what he's talking about, but I just feel like it's big. Look at it. Jesus says, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me, and you know what, when I think about believe, I think believe first comes from a place of love. If it's real belief in Jesus, it's coming because we know that he's loved us and who he is and he's in our life. But look at what Jesus says. He says, whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing. And they will do even greater things than these. What? Did you get what that just said? Jesus has dreamed up this vision, this win for us as a church, for you as a Christ follower, that is, I don't even know how to say it. Jesus is saying, I've already got things in place, and if you will love like I have taught you to love, which is going to lead you to believe in me like we declared and sang together this morning, the win is bigger than you can think. There are things that you're going to get to experience that are greater. And I don't know what Jesus is talking about here exactly. I'll just be honest with you. Like, I don't know exactly what he's talking about here when he says you're going to do greater things than these. So immediately as I started wrestling through this, I was like, well, what were some of the things that Jesus did? I mean, Jesus brought a dead man back to life. Okay, anybody done that one yet? That's pretty cool. Brought a dead man to life. He looked at a blind man and said, hey, go get some mud and wipe it on your face and then wipe it off and you'll see. Like I tell my kids to go get in the mud and they don't come out any better. They come back worse. Jesus looks at a man who has been crippled and laying by a pool for decades and says, get up and walk. And what does he do? He gets up and walks. I don't know what Jesus was talking about when he said you're going to do greater things than these. I just know, though, it's probably more than what we think it is. And it's probably a bigger vision for our lives than what we've dreamed up. Because I think We take this love one another thing and we make it so small and we almost turn it into, I'm going to smile at people. I'll hold the door for somebody. That's great. We should do those things. You should smile and you should hold the door for people. But I think when Jesus said, I want you to love one another as I have loved you, and as you love like I have loved, that's going to lead people to me. They're going to know whose you are. And then he ends this conversation out and he says, you do this, you're going to do greater things than I've done. The beauty of what we're wanting to start with Missional Community is that we can bring this conversation before Jesus and say, teach us. Teach us. We don't know what you dreamed up when you said greater things than these, but we want to figure it out. We want to step into it. We want to walk into it. And if I'm just being honest, if our faith is a me-driven thing, if it's even just simply a Sunday morning for an hour and a half centered thing, you will not experience these things that Jesus is laying out in front of us. So the invitation is great, but the invitation starts really very personal. So I want you to just begin to think this morning, what does it look like for me to love like Jesus? So that will lead people to Jesus. Our missional communities are going to be a big way that we're going to do that. A couple other ways that we're going to do this as a church, collectively, over the next few months that I'm excited about. One is this summer we're going to be hosting a sports camp. And we're going to be telling you more about that over the next month. You're going to be hearing a lot more about that. I'm excited about that. But you know what that's going to create? That's going to create an opportunity for us to get out in the community, to work together, to love one another, serve together. And it's going to give us an opportunity for the people in the community that are maybe disconnected from God, not interested in the church. But you know what? They may bring their kids and drop them off at a sports camp. But for us, just maybe in that moment, in those moments, they would see something about what Jesus was talking about here. On the 5th Sundays this month, throughout this year, on 3 of those, the first one coming in April, we're gonna have what we're calling a For the City Sunday. And we're going to have a very abbreviated service gathering time that morning, and then we're going to get out and we're going to have different things planned for you to sign up for in advance. We're going to get out and just love on this community, on this city. We're going to do different things. We'll be letting you know what those are as we move closer. But you know what? It's going to give us an opportunity to get out, outside the walls of the building, be in a relationship with each other, love one another, serve together, but serving others at the same time and giving them a chance to look in and see, wow, what is it about that group of people? They're not just here to do a task. Like, they really actually like being around each other. And you know what? A lot of people don't have a positive impression of the church and how the church interacts together. My hope is that we could begin to cast a fresh light on what that might look like for people. So the worship team is going to come up, and I just want you to bow your head and just to begin to ask God in this moment, what does it look like for me to respond to what I've heard this morning? What does it look like, God, for you to teach me more about love? What could you do, God, if I loved others the way that you've loved me? I was vulnerable enough to share my story and learn somebody else's story. I was persistent enough to push through. I was willing to wrestle with the fact that your love compels me to chase a very big mission and a very big vision. Just begin to ask God to lead you into that. He knows exactly what he wants to say. Maybe you've never even responded to his love, and you've never even stepped into a relationship with him, and that's where he's brought you. He's brought you to this moment where you're like, wow, this love Jesus has is a powerful thing. I've never even responded to that. Maybe that's your invitation this morning. I don't know how God's going to stir in your heart. I don't know how he is right now. I just want to ask you to open your heart.